Hey, George, Carolyn, Richard.
Hi, Marco. Marco, do you happen to have Peter's? Oh, never mind. Speak and he shall appear.
Yeah, I know where he is. He's right here. He's right there.
I was just getting a little nervous for our quorum, so it looks like no problem now.
Is it just the four of us, Hannah?
Amy is possibly joining. I never got a full yes or no from her, but you guys were the four that made this meeting possible. So thank you.
And no new people.
They are not fully trained yet.
Ah, you have to be trained for this.
Yeah, I know. I think that's a bold statement about us there, Hannah.
I was just gonna say, you have to be trained for this. Oh,
No comment.
I know. All right, so there's just probably four of us then. Okay, that's fine.
I always love Marco's backdrop. It looks like he's like a man of interest and leisure. And
Yeah, until I move, and then it's all weird. But look at that. Look, where is it? Look at that highway right there. Look at
there
that.
you go. My
Yes.
God. Is that the bypass?
That it is. Yes, it's officially the bypass. You're right. Well, if we're ready, everybody ready? I think we are. I'm not sure anybody else is coming. So call to order the special meeting tonight for the Planning and Zoning Commission of Glenwood Springs. It is February 8th, 2022. This meeting is held via Zoom. So the webinar ID for tonight is 865-1028-9325. And you can also watch us on YouTube, or you can call in with a phone at 1-669-900-6833. And now actually the roll call. So.
Commissioner Dim.
Yes.
Commissioner Shaver.
Here.
Commissioner Sipperly.
Here.
Commissioner White. Commissioner Waller.
Here.
Commissioner Wissing. Commissioner Connerton. And then I'll call the alternates as well. Commissioner Weimer. And then Commissioner Hardcastle.
Okay, thank you, Jen. And from what I understand, first point of order, Pete was appointed up to a permanent member, correct? I think.
Yes.
Excellent. So welcome, Pete, to the constant crew, I guess, and also welcome to the other to the new members, which are not here tonight, but I understand we have two new members. So hopefully on the regular night we'll get to meet them. So anyway, moving on into comments from citizens appearing for items that are not on the agenda, and I'm trying to get the participant view. There it is. If somebody's here, please. Oh, there's Amy. Hi, Amy. Want to let everybody know that Amy actually has joined the meeting. So can we add that to the roll call? Since we haven't really done any official business yet. So thank you. Again, comments from citizens appearing that are not on the agenda. If you're here, please raise your hand. And I see no hands, so we'll jump right into why we're actually here tonight, and that is a co-text amendment 070080, I guess. I think if I read this right, and I think Richard is gonna tell us about it. I have a feeling.
Yes, thank you, everybody. Richard Peterson Creamer, Carp New Hanlon Law Firm, Assistant City Attorney. Thanks again for coming together to have this special meeting this evening. As you might have noticed, before you is a lengthy set of regulations, text amendments to Title 070. I'll give you a little bit of background on the state law that kind of upholds these regulations. In the 70s, the General Assembly adopted a law called the Areas and Activities of State Interest, which conveniently has a number attached to it that is much shorter, which is 1041. And so from here on out, I'm going to just call this the 1041 regulations. And that law basically authorized local governments, counties, and municipalities essentially to regulate in areas that did not always traditionally fall under the local government land use authorities in state law. And for a while, some of these powers weren't really entirely worked out until they ended up getting into court cases. But over that 50 years almost now, courts have regularly kind of upheld these land use and development regulatory powers by local governments. And so the law splits up the areas of regulation into, as the title calls it, areas of state interest and activities of state interest. The areas being, basically something drawn on a map or a kind of a geologic or geographic feature that, if it's impacted, can be regulated. And these were mineral resource areas, natural hazard areas, areas containing historical, natural, archaeological resources, and areas around key facilities. Key facilities includes, I believe it's airports, transit hubs, highway, basically state highways, and a few other kind of particularly defined areas. And then the activities of state interest are water extensions, sewage extensions, solid waste disposal sites, dumps, airports, transit terminals, arterial highways, the major facilities of public utility, development of new communities, municipal industrial water projects, nuclear detonations, and geothermal resources used for electricity production. So that's kind of the background of the 1041 statute. And, across the state over the years, various counties and municipalities have adopted regulations. Glenwood Springs has not up to this point. We are expecting applications coming in and for projects being proposed, in the relatively near future that we think having 1041 regulations could be very helpful for. In particular, there may be some proposals that could come from governmental or quasi-governmental entities that would, at this time, probably only be reviewed under the location and extent permitting review process. And the L&E process, I think you all have seen it relatively recently. Basically, the city has some authority to say, here's what we want you to do. We'll add these conditions. Please, please, please do this. But if the applicant decides that they disagree with you and their board votes to overrule the city, then the city's rejection or conditioning of approval can be basically overruled. There is good case law that basically says 1041 powers are separate from location and extent. So this is a good way for local land use authorities to be able to tell other governments and quasi-governmental authorities, no, you need to follow our code as well. And so the regulations that we've put in front of you, they kind of split up into two discrete pieces. One is is a process for identifying and adopting regulations. It's kind of a two-step process to identify and adopt regulations for the areas and the activities. And then there's the actual permitting regulations themselves. And that's why these are so long. But the statute allows you to, and this will get to council eventually, but it allows you to adopt all of these regulations in a single hearing. And so we figured it would be quite a bit more efficient to try to bring all this forward in a single hearing. We did not do all of the activities or areas that are allowed under the 1041 statute, kind of anticipating what types of projects might be coming in, and areas that maybe the city doesn't want to regulate. So we put forward for the activities of state interest, and this is in the cover memo, site selection, construction of major new domestic water and sewage treatment systems, or major extension of water and sewage treatment systems, construction of major public utility, efficient utilization of municipal and industrial water projects, and site selection of rapid or mass transit terminals, stations, or fixed guideways. So those are the activities of state interest. And the areas of state interest, we decided under the historical and natural resources area to identify the rivers, the Colorado River and the Roaring Fork River as they pass through the city. Probably trying to track the riparian setback regulations, that anything within that area would be subject to 1041. And then the other being key facilities of highways 6 and 24 and highway 82, basically intersections with those. We tried to create a reasonable threshold, which would be requiring a CDOT access permit. But from that, we are trying to exempt, for example, smaller residential proposals that may just, tip a road or an intersection over CDOT's threshold, because that we don't think that adding additional regulatory burdens to smaller residential projects is something that the city is very interested in. So overall, there's lengthy application submittal requirements. Some of these track existing requirements in the land use code. Some of it goes beyond some of those areas as well. And then there's standards for approval as well in the regulations that grant the decision makers quite a bit of discretion in approving with conditions or denying a 1041 permit. I think the take-home message is these regulations are intended to catch larger projects that will have impacts on city infrastructure, on natural resources, on historical resources, projects that are going to have significant significant controversy oftentimes, and would not necessarily otherwise be caught under the land use code No. 7.0. And so that's kind of why we decided at this time to bring these forward. So happy to answer any questions. Let me know if there's any particular provisions you wanted to discuss. I didn't necessarily want to walk through 35 pages of regulations with you over Zoom, but we can dive into any areas you have concerns.
All right, excellent. Thank you, Richard. Back to us for questions. Raise your hand, please. And we are starting with Commissioner Zipperly.
Hi, thanks. Thanks for that explanation, Richard. That was some heavy legalese that we had to look at. I would just want to make sure that the parts that the city did sort of cherry pick from the enormous list did include the historic, cultural, and archaeological resources.
So at this point, we have not added historical or archaeological resources. If that's a recommendation you'd like to make, I think we would need to look at some other examples of how you do that. But it is, I think it's an area we didn't necessarily discuss. Jen, did you have? It wasn't an area we really looked at.
We didn't, and we do have, if there's a federal project that's happening, for example, the Grand Avenue Bridge is one where they have a 106 review. There is this process that happens with that. And the Historic Preservation Commission is the certified local government. And I think sometimes when we've been asked, we've been on a very tight timeline for the, the referral, but, that 106 review is before I got here, but that's something that would have a huge impact that would be sent to the Historic Preservation Commission or staff, depending on timeline related to like a big project like that, something that would have a 106 review. So for example, if we pursue the 6th Street project that we're looking to have some federalized money as part of that, then there would have to be a 106 review as part of that.
But for a state project, and we are actually discussing 1041 is agreement with the state, then the 106, section 106 does not apply. Furthermore, it doesn't seem like the HPC has much teeth in order to approve or deny applications.
Well, I think the Historic Preservation Act, and it's not an area I've looked at recently, but I know it is, there are mandatory protective measures in the federal law. I cannot say definitively how that is applied locally. And just looking at the areas of state interest with historical archaeological resources, we would need to identify those areas with specificity. It wouldn't just be generally historical or cultural resources. So it is, it's an area where we could do more study potentially and say, here are the areas, here are the cultural and historical resource areas that we would like to identify and protect under the 1041 regulations, but it's not something that staff has looked at this time with these ones.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shaver.
I noticed that there is Exhibit A and Exhibit B reference, and I'm assuming that one of those, Exhibit A was what Jen sent us this afternoon, but I don't think we've seen Exhibit B. I assume those should be attached.
We are in process on those. We made GIS do a lot of work in the last few weeks with the redistricting process. So I believe it is on their to-do list, and it'll be available hopefully for council. It is the exhibit that was shown that was added, I think, was rivers, and then we would be adding the creeks to that. Let's see. Yeah, so we included Mitchell Creek, Oasis Creek,
And 3 Mile.
3 Mile Creek, yeah. And then the other exhibit would just be the lengths of highways 6 and 24 and 82 through the corporate boundaries of the city. So these pieces are still in process, just creating maps.
Yeah, I'm kind of interested, living on the river, about the 35 feet. And I guess, is there a way that can be more specific? You know, it's pretty, you know, from a graphical standpoint, at least, it's hard to determine where that line occurs.
They're 35 feet from the high water mark, you mean? Where?
Yes, correct.
So the exhibit that was shared today delineates the high water marks. So yes, then anything. So you're saying you would just like to see that map?
Well, maybe it's not appropriate part of this. I think wasn't there a reference to a certain definition of high water through the Corps of Engineers or somebody like that? I wonder if that shouldn't be referenced, if that is the case.
Yeah, I think ordinary high water mark, it's a delineation under the Clean Water Act that's made by the federal government, by the Army Corps. And so I believe that's what this map is showing, that this is an actual map that's been produced showing the high water mark. But I believe we have that delineation in the city GIS files, and that's the intent, is to have that exhibit produced with the ordinance showing precisely where that line would be and the 35 feet beyond it.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Jen, did you have something to add? Your hand was up.
I just wanted to let you know that we did, SGM helped us map this. So we, after the riparian setback conversation, engaged SGM to do this work for us. So, and we just now have the GIS from them.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Waller, please.
Richard, thanks for your explanation. I'm kind of like Carolyn. It was interesting trying to read through it. And I guess for me, one thing that it seems, in fact, one thing you had in here, that the process is similar to the existing land use applications already in the code. So what I took from what you explained was, I used to work for CMC or working with RE1, that those quasi-government agencies can do the location and extent and, try to be a good neighbor. And then if they don't like what they get, then they can move forward. And that this gives more teeth into that for these specified areas. Am I kind of saying that right? That
yes, and and there could be non-governmental actors as well that are proposing something, a larger industrial type project that could increase traffic on the streets, even if it's outside of the city. But yes, what you're saying is accurate.
We would catch that anyway, though, right? That would be part of the development process that they would come through, and with, going through staff, community development and through us, that, all of that stuff would hopefully get caught anyway, right? Is that?
You're saying for quasi-governmental or
Well, no, well, for anyone, for quasi-governmental, for private, let's say I was a developer and I wanted to do something on South 82 and, I would still have to go through that process, and working with community development, I would get, here's whatever issues or things I have to work through is and all I'm trying to do is just understand where this is, what's the teeth that this adds in to that development process or.
Yeah, so I think I guess we'd break it up into three kind of categories. It would be the governmental and quasi-governmental entities, like you were saying, CMC or
Right.
RE1. And with those, it's not every project they propose that would
Right.
come through 1041. It would be the ones in the areas and the activities that have been identified.
Right.
And then there could be some private development in the city that this could add a layer to, where it's probably
Okay.
a development activity that is going to have a really high intensity impact,
Okay.
and where maybe it wouldn't have gone to city council previously, and now it will end up going to city council for a 1041 permit because of that high intensity use. And then the third, based on traffic impacts, could be development occurring outside of the city, but which puts new added use and impact on key facilities. For example, the intersections with 82 and 6 and 24. And so I think those are kind of the three discrete areas where you could see these regulations being invoked.
Okay, thanks. And then the one other kind of question I have is that it's interesting getting this presentation from you versus from Hannah or Trent or someone like that. And so I guess my question isn't just hearing how Jen's weighed in already, is that this has been vetted really strongly with staff, and that to Carolyn's question, you guys decided what areas you were going to choose, of the activities of interest and those particular things of that if you're going to do a public hearing and all of that sort of thing, you're trying to go through it one time. So you try to hit the high impact of ones that, as you're looking ahead and think of what are issues with infrastructure and that sort of thing. Is that a fair statement or?
Yeah, I think that's a fair statement. We were, I think, trying to look out 1, 2, 3 years and think what kind of big proposals are we, potentially going to see. And I think trying to tailor it to that instead of just throwing the kitchen sink in, particularly as it relates to areas, because as we kind of just saw, there's some intensive kind of mapping exercises that have to occur for those.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Shaver.
Just to follow up as clarification of kind of what Pete was talking about, just as an example of the CDOT, most recent CDOT application that came up for a location and extent review. Would that fall under, if there was some controversy, which there wasn't in this case, but would that follow under this regulation at 1041? Or are they far enough off of 6 and 24? There's not traffic impacts. Just as an example.
Well, that one was weird because Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, that was kind of a subdivision that wasn't, right? Or
I was
Well, the
wondering
most recent
if
one, I think they
George-
were adding,
George,
I think they were adding a building and or a couple of buildings that are actually being constructed right now.
I think in either case, it probably would not have hit the traffic threshold to impact 6 and 24, but that, some of these would be kind of technical questions where we've set a threshold and you'd have to see based on what the proposer is bringing to us, whether the regulations would apply.
So in the terms of the highways, it's mainly traffic impacts that are potentially triggering this review.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's how we see the impacts to those key facilities, you know, and most of the other projects that would affect those highways would be a city or a CDOT project, which CDOT is the property owner there. So,
And if it were, say that it required another intersection into the highway, then that would trigger it as well, or not?
I believe that any new intersections would probably trigger 1041 on the highway.
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And moving on to Commissioner Connaughton, please.
Oh, I was going to put my hand down. Commissioner Waller asked the question that I was going to ask, and it was more of a summation. He did a great job of doing that, so that I have an idea, because this was definitely a very long document for me to grasp. But now that I say that and I have your attention, how many cities have actually adopted this? You say we're one of the few, or you're saying that we're one of the many, or?
I think it's in the dozens. We looked at it a few weeks ago. I'm sorry, I don't quite have that number, but it's many counties. I'd say the majority of the counties that are, I know Garfield County, Eagle County, Summit County, all have these. Some of our other towns do, that our firm represents. And so we've, worked with that. It's not rare, but it's not a majority of municipalities. I'd say probably in the several dozens.
All right, excellent. So to actually piggyback on Commissioner Connaughton's question, even though not a whole lot of communities have adopted this, but the communities that have adopted this, is it common to see filtered out areas of interest like that? Or is it more, or do some of them do just a blanket over the entire town and say, hey, we could have issues everywhere here? Because it reads to me that it's more specific to areas than who's actually coming with a proposal.
The statute, I believe, requires it to kind of be really identify the area, to not just include the entire boundaries, but to actually say, here's where that resource is. And the ones I've worked with actually more and oftentimes just involve the activities. So including the areas, is something we kind of went back and forth on, but agreed. The rivers are so important to the city, and then having state highways through the city are also can create major impacts. So those ones really did make sense in the case of Glenwood Springs to include.
Right. Okay. So that's a Colorado statute. I assume that you have to identify areas and not say, hey, everything is equally important for us.
All
here.
cultural resources in the city. Yeah. They want you to be pretty specific about it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That makes, I guess, sense to an extent. Not necessarily what I would do, but if that's what we have to do, that's what we'll do. Thanks. Commissioner Shaver, please.
So does this extend to the city itself? In other words, if the city were to do something in proximity to the river, for instance, they wouldn't call it upon themselves, I guess, to fall under these regulations, but can somebody else bring forth this action under the 1041?
I think the same way that the city subjects itself to location and extent, we would probably subject the city to these regulations. I think that is the intent. Oftentimes for a proposal that would trigger these, the city is already having to go through federal environmental permitting or some state CDPHE permitting, where a lot of this documentation is probably already being brought together. And so running it through Planning Commission and City Council does make sense, especially, we recognize these are areas and activities that are likely to be controversial. So it's good to have a hearing on it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Waller.
One other clarification one I have, Richard, is on that table 060. If you could put that up, the summary of development review procedures. And I guess what I didn't understand, and I'm sure it's probably because I'm old and slow, but is the 1041 application, it's all exempt from all of the procedures, the development review procedures, and yeah, so if you could kind of explain that last column, where they're where that's and so why are they exempt? I guess that's my question.
Hannah, if you are.
Yep. I'm here. So on this last column, and I think we put this together to just kind of show you guys, but this is like the first iteration. This might change a little bit before it goes to council. But we had a discussion on of these development permits, what certain thresholds of like what was going to Planning and Zoning Commission or what was going to City Council. So I believe all of the items that are highlighted here as exempt are ones that would not be going to City Council, and they are decided by the Planning and Zoning Commission. So there's a certain threshold in our discussions that was appropriate. But so if you see like anything that doesn't have an exempt mark in it, and I realize there's a lot of E's here.
Yeah, I mean, that's all that's there for all of
Yes.
the 1041. It looks like there's no teeth here. It's like we're gumming them or something.
Well, so, floodplain development permit, obviously, that one's not exempt. So things that were originally going to City Council for decision anyways was how this was originally put together. Jen, did you have anything further that you can recall from that staff conversation where we were discussing this item?
I think we were trying to visually represent it. And so I do think we probably need a little asterisk or something so that it's, in that category. Maybe it's a different color, some other way that we make a notation there. But I think the rest of this chart functions as if it's blank, then, like the check is the thing where it's required. And so we were just trying to say where it's not required. So I think we need to probably clean this chart up a little bit to get to intent.
Okay, yeah, it's a great chart. I think it's a great chart. I was wondering when Richard talked about the 1041 adds like another layer of on top of it. That was just where I was confused. So,
but just to jump in quick, the exempt means that the P&Z is still going to see it. It's just not going to council. So we still have teeth with the 1041. It's just discretion of the P&Z.
But isn't that, I thought I read something in there that they talked about, development project of 5 or less units. And so, the same as normal development, but anyway, maybe I'm asking the wrong question of what, I mean, if it's a larger project, then obviously it's going to council as well, and similar to normal, right?
No, I think you're asking the right question, but I'm definitely, because you confused me. So it was the right question. So is the exempt Okay, help me out. Just because it says exempt, doesn't mean it's exempt from 1041.
Or they don't have to turn it in. That's how I would, that's, if I was the developer, I'd go, woo-hoo.
Yeah, right. But I don't think
mean,
that's
I don't
what
know,
that's
but-
not the intent, is it?
Right, I don't know.
So just as a clarifying factor, I flipped through my notes back to when staff was discussing this, and it really was everything that wasn't already going to city council for a decision is listed under exempt. And your question is great, and it's getting me thinking about some additional language that we might need to explain about the why behind that. Which I can't necessarily give you all right now. There was extensive thought process in this, and so great question, and let us try and flush that out a little bit more for explanation at the council level as well.
So I'm terribly sorry. I'm still confused. So don't say yes yet, Hannah. So optional master plan, final plans, whatever. Just because it says exempt doesn't mean they don't have to do the 1041.
That was exactly the intent of that column. So does 1041 apply? And everywhere you see an E, that type of development permit, it's saying they are exempt from having to submit a 1041. Jen, Richard, did I get that right or did I flip it?
I think that was correct because we were trying to, these were the staff level permits that.
So everyone that's got an exemption is a planning and zoning commission or staff level approval.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes, I see that. So unless this application is of the magnitude that requires council to look at it, 1041 does not apply.
I think that is the intent.
And that's what we want.
That was kind of, we're trying to balance heavy regulation on a lot of different projects or heavy regulation on high intensity projects that are,
okay.
Get to council level.
So just quick example, school district coming forward with some, I don't know, transformer buildings or something that may not need to go to council, but comes in front of us, but they do impact an intersection or something. And since it's exempt, it's just another location and extent review. And we don't have any teeth to say, hey, could you maybe move the buildings back a little or do this or do that? Is that a good example? That's how it's going to go?
I was going to say that I think location and extent only comes to P&Z. And so location and extent that would have stopped at P&Z if it met that threshold would now go to city council for 1041.
Could we
But who
refer
makes
it?
that-
I mean, like,
That confused me further.
Who makes
Sorry.
the decision that it becomes a 1041? If we at P&Z have a location and extent school district, let's stick with it, and all of a sudden we're going to go, oh boy, this is going to not work out very well. We need a 1041 on this. Who makes that decision?
I think it's going to be a staff level decision when we see an application or have a pre-application meeting with the proponent.
So sorry, Richard, to interrupt, but so that said, a lower magnitude development or what we do on the P&Z and staff level, even though it says exempt, could still become a 1041 due to the impact in one of those areas? I guess what I'm saying is instead of just saying exempt, I want to make sure that certain things don't get passed anymore that we had to pass through in recent years because it was only a location and extent. This seems like this is an opportunity for us to actually have a say in certain things, and I would hate for it to just be passed over.
and to be honest, Hannah, after your explanation, I feel more comfortable that you're exempt from doing a 1041 in those areas. And as I'm looking at, development plant permits, and it's admin and minor, but not major. It's not a location and extent. It's not a floodplain development permit. All of those, they have to do it. So, but it sounds like you're going to kind of readdress this and kind of look at it some, or.
Well, so I think what might be helpful is actually it's included in your packet, the 1041 text amendment. And if you scroll down on that attachment, under exemptions, which I believe starts on page 4 of that document, item F is talking about how this applies to our development permits for both the area of state interest and then activities as well. So if you guys can review that really quickly or take a look at it, that is explaining how that works. So F, for development in a designated area of state interest, an application and permit under the regulations in this article is not required for projects that submit the following types. So it lists all the types there and is also describing more of the exemptions. And yes, Amy, I understand your confusion on that one. We said anything that wasn't going to city council, and then we said the location and extent. That one is kind of the outlier there. So my apologies that I grouped that all together. So for the most part, those are all ones that would have stopped with you guys. Location and extent is the outlier where this would still have the possibility to be triggered after reviewed by staff to see which of the thresholds were met in that instance.
Okay, that just made a whole lot of sense. Thank you.
The intent, right? So the intent of these exemptions is to exempt smaller or more procedural type of approvals. Going back to your hypothetical, Marco, I don't see anywhere that the school district gets exempted under the table or this list of exemptions.
Or the area they're going for, or the area they want to put something in.
Right, as long as it triggers the threshold,
right,
for the areas and the activities.
Okay, I'm sure you guys thought about this long and hard, and we're just jumping into this, but I just, but when there's confusion, I gotta have some sort of an answer. So
no, it's helpful for us to hear that feedback, and we'll take a harder look and run it through some hypotheticals.
So that said, Richard, you don't need an action from us tonight.
It's as a text amendment, we need a recommendation.
We do.
To city council to adopt, or recommend approval with amendments,
okay,
or denial.
So it'd be nice to have okay, even though item B is continued. Item B is continued to February.
Yeah,
That's
item
correct.
B is actually a separate item. So this one has an action item.
This is standalone and we can do it alone. Okay, excellent. Let's see, since this is a public hearing, oh, sorry, Commission, back to you guys quick. Let's be cognizant of the time. It's 46. So any additional questions to staff? And Commissioner Zipperly, please.
I was just wondering if the reasons that why the historic and archaeological sites were not included is because they'd have to be designated on a map ahead of time. And that could probably slow down the whole procedure of designating areas. Is that right?
I think at this point that would be my response, and it's something that we could revisit. That we would need to kind of go through that exercise and look at the inventory of archaeological and historical sites.
So can we come back to this document every few years then as it needs to be adjusted?
Certainly, and that's why we've adopted the regulations. As I said, it's a two-step process. We've adopted the regulations for actually designating the areas of state interest, and so we could come back and do a discrete designation for cultural and historic areas.
Okay, great.
I think that's a great point, and I don't think we should wait too long to do that. Obviously after item B, since that's next. So, but after that, excellent. So, any more questions to staff at this point? See none. Thank you. Open the public comments for tonight for planning item 222. Please raise your hand. And I see none, so we'll close the public portion and we'll bring it back to the commission. And let's see, planning item 0222, consideration of a code text amendment, Article 070, 080, guidelines and regulations for matters of the state interest. And I think staff is recommending approval, so I'm entertaining a motion.
I just raised my hand, so I'll make a recommendation or make a proposal to approve planning item 02-22, consideration of code text amendments to municipal code title 070 pursuant to CRS title 24, article 65.1, and other changes to the land use code.
Based on article.
I'll second that.
Okay, I think we should add that it's the guidelines and regulations for matters of state interest.
Oh, yeah, that's, the 4.8, article. Yes, I'll add that as well. It's the guidelines and regulations for matters of state interest. Yeah, that's.
Thank you, Pete.
Second that change.
Excellent. Thank you, George. Any more discussion on this for tonight? No, we'll see none. Then I'll call for the question. All in favor, say aye.
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 And those opposed? And we'll see none. Thank you. That looks like motion carries unanimously. Thank you. And then we need to actually continue item B to the February 22nd meeting. So I'm entertaining a motion to do so.
So moved.
Excellent. We have a motion to continue fire and emergency services impact fees.
I'll second for you, Marco.
Excellent. And a second. Any discussion on this item for tonight? See none. We'll call for the question to continue item B. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Excellent. Those opposed? Again, we'll see none. So motion carries. And that was it for our planning items for tonight. Really quickly going through commissioner comments. We'll start with Commissioner Waller.
No.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shaver.
I have no.
Thank you. Commissioner Zipperly.
Nothing, thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Connerton.
I have none. Thank you.
Excellent. I have nothing myself. Short and sweet. Director's comments, updates. Jen, anything exciting?
We'll see you in a few minutes for the steering committee meeting.
How do we get there? I didn't get anything.
You did not. Okay, we'll send that Zoom link out again.
Excellent. I didn't get it. Just me, but okay, cool. Well,
And
if there's
send it
not-
to me too, Jen. Thank you.
and Commissioner Zipperly too. Yeah.
We'll send it to everybody.
Send it to everybody. Looks like we all are in need of the link to keep talking. So cool, excellent. That was it. Thank you, everybody. Meeting is adjourned. I'll see you in a few minutes.